I'm a fan of fantasy, so I listen to Easy and Alan on their Just a Fantasy Fan podcast. Now here's Easy and Chris Allen.
And welcome to Wednesday night on the Sportscrew Radio Network. This is a Fantasy Fan Sportscast. One, if not the great show on that network. But follow him to hear all the shows. I think he said like 28 shows now. Don't quote me on that. Could be 4. But I think it's more than that because I have at least 4. So I know that's more than that. But follow him at Sportscrew Radio on iTunes and Twitter. Sportscrew Radio Network, creating sports, fantasy sports, DFS, and gambling content 24/7. thesportscrew.com. And I guess if you need gambling content 24/7, call that number. You know, all the other gambling podcasts now will say, if you have a problem, call 1-800-GAMBLING-PROBLEM. I don't even know if that's right, but I'll take a shot. I've learned if you have a major problem, just dial those letters and you'll probably get somebody. But I am here with my weather expert, fantasy football genius, writer extraordinaire, Mr. Chris Allen. Hello,
What's
sir.
going on? How we doing tonight? I mean, it's week 11. Fantasy playoffs are, they're creeping up on us kind of quick now. So
it is week 11. I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, me too.
I think I needed to talk football tonight. But before we talk football,
okay.
I heard a song tonight.
So
I'm not a country person, not a country music person. I'm not.
All right.
I'm not. Sorry. But for some reason, I like country music award shows. I like all award shows. That's my.
Okay.
Would that be like a secret thing? What do they call that? Where you have like that little.
That's a vice, I think is what they call it.
I love award shows.
Okay.
I think it's when I grew up with the Academy Awards and the Grammys. In my house, it was a big night, you know.
All right.
Now, if it's the same thing, and I don't like country music, but I like country music award. And I heard a song and I heard a lyric, and I thought, damn, I'm gonna that lyric.
It hit you.
It hit me. And here's the lyric, Chris.
Okay.
I was debating if I should sing it, but I've kind of realized since I don't like country music, I really can't sing country music.
You couldn't do it justice.
No more than I can sing, you know, heavy metal or anything like that.
Okay.
But this is a song, and the main verse goes, long neck, ice cold beer never broke my heart. Like diamond rings and football teams have torn this boy apart. I thought, that's me. That's me. Long neck, ice cold beer has never broken my heart.
That's it. Spot the lie. I can't.
But diamond rings and football teams have torn this boy apart.
I can't spot the lie. I can't find a truer, string of words that I've ever heard before in a song.
I think that hits this podcast.
That's
right.
direct.
That's right. I'm just saying.
Spot on accuracy.
And you know what? When I was a young teenage boy, and me and you are beer guys too, but when I was a young teenage boy, long neck bottles were a thing. My grandpa and my dad had that box of beer. And today, young kids, when I tell my son, hey, you owe me a case of beer, bring me a case of beer, he brings me like this little wussy ass 12-pack of Budweiser or something. When I was a kid, a case meant 24 long neck Stroh's bottles. It was a big cardboard box, and you open them up, and
that's what you got.
Yes, you got ice cold long neck beers that never ever broke my heart.
Yeah,
but diamond rings and football teams have torn this boy apart.
Okay,
I'm just saying. And and my football team, Chris, I had in my long history of playing fantasy football. Something happened to me this week.
Uh-oh.
I lost by 1.1.
Oof.
Chris, I never had a more exciting Monday night of fantasy football in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Close match all week.
Right.
Monday night, we both have players or scoring factors on the field at the same time.
Okay.
I had the San Francisco 49ers defense. He had Chris Carson, running back, Seattle Seahawks.
Mm-hmm.
Every time things happened, our points changed.
Oh, sure.
We were so close. And because it was offense versus defense, it really was exciting. It wasn't where I had to wait till my offense, I didn't have to wait till my running back came on. And this literally, I had lost. I was like, oh my God, I lost by 4.5. And then they intercept the ball on the goal line with 2 minutes to go. Now I'm winning by like 3. I had it in the bag till the field goal was missed. Because once the field goal was missed, I was up 2.7, I think.
Oh, and then they got the ball back.
It was.
That's a next level sweat right there.
The most exciting fantasy. I'm going to say 30 minutes because it might have been the only 10 minutes of real football, but it lasted about 30 minutes if you stayed up and watched the whole game. And the gentleman I was playing, he was a little upset. He works for the city here in town.
Okay.
And it snowed that night. So he was out plowing. And he would actually pull off the road every once in a while. He runs the snow plows because it snowed that night. We got like 4 inches of snow up here.
Oh, wow.
So he would tweet me every once in a while and go, am I really winning again? And then I wouldn't hear from him for like 15 or 20 minutes. And, he'd go, wait, now I'm losing. I mean, it was
oh my goodness,
pretty crazy. So I have to tell you, I am been on pins and needles all night. I've been, and believe it or not, the 0.1 scares me the most because I've seen point corrections, but usually it's just a point, not very rarely you get over a point correction. And that's what I thought. Well, so I've been watching for corrections, hoping maybe, I've heard of it, but I've never seen a point correction actually change a score.
Yeah.
Or an actual victory or anything like that. Now, but I did look, he had Le'Veon Bell, who just last week had a 1-point correction, so.
Oh, really?
He didn't even know because I said something.
I didn't know.
I said something in the chat room like, all right, it was close, 1.1, congratulations, blah, blah. But I said, let's wait till Thursday morning. And he texts back, he goes, what happens on Thursday morning? I go, oh, you don't know that there's point corrections on Thursdays? He goes, no. It's like, I have to sweat another 2 days. I said, well, kind of.
Yeah.
I've never seen it happen, but, anything's possible, So, great match. I really didn't need to win, and I made a few trades that I would have really won the week if I hadn't traded away. It's bye weeks, and I made some trades to get some players that were on bye.
Oh, okay.
I didn't start all my players because obviously I'm now looking towards the playoffs. So
good.
I did make a couple crazy trades that if you listen to the League of Anarchy podcast last night, few people weren't happy because the trade there, it flipped the whole league a little bit because the guy that I traded with obviously now got some starters instead of some bye week guys. And he ended up winning against somebody that was projected to win if he hadn't have gotten better players at the last minute.
Oh,
and they both had, they're both like 5 and 4, 4 and 5. You know what I'm saying? They were pretty close. And then obviously the guy that beat me, he's right there too. And so if I'd have beat him, he'd have fallen down. So, it was a pretty, I got crapped on in our league for making a trade that kind of flipped everything around. But this is the time of year you have to look towards playoffs, and
you do. Yeah, absolutely.
And take advantage of people who have to win. And obviously, I've already put a few trades out today with people who have bye week. They need to win and they got guys on bye weeks. Well,
yeah, I was just doing that before I hopped on the podcast with you tonight, just looking at rosters and people that are probably going to be forced into making some tough decisions because they're sitting at 5-5, 6-4, those types of win-loss records. So they need a win. So, and I'm at 7-3, somewhere in there. So I'm not a playoff lock per se, but I'm sitting pretty decent. So,
well, I mean, I'm not a lock, but I really only need one more win based on everything.
Yeah,
I need one more win, and I
think after this week,
and I play weeks 12 and 13. I play the 2 last place teams.
Oh, okay.
And one's already playing with keepers. He's already out, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of figured, all right, yeah. Some people thought it was a little early to play for the playoffs, but hey, if it backfires and the 2 bad teams beat me and I don't go to the playoffs, then I've learned my lesson, Chris.
Right.
Because, like I say, ice cold long neck beers never broke my heart.
Yeah.
But diamond rings and fantasy football teams have torn this boy apart.
I hear you.
It is my new favorite song. And let's drop some players this week, Mr. Chris Allen. We're going to talk about your articles, your quarterback keepers, and your drops of the week.
Yeah.
And drops of the week now become a whole new thing, also looking towards the playoffs. So I'm kind of curious your opinion on that, because, obviously, if you're already in the playoffs, you might drop some quality of player. If you're not in the playoffs yet, you might drop a different quality of player. So be kind of curious what you have to say with that. The drop article, where can people find it if they want to go there and read it every week?
Numberfire.com. It comes out every early Tuesday afternoon because we want to get those out as people are starting to make roster decisions and making their waiver claims and whatnot. So it should be out, early Tuesday afternoon, somewhere around there.
All right. We'll start just like your article did. We'll go over drop candidates from the week before and what happened. Obviously, Gardner Minshew was a drop, but they also had a bye week, and we're not assuming he's going to start, which I think is still pretty much the case, right? Foles is
Foles is going to be the starter this week. Yeah, Doug Marrone said so. I think it was on. So let's see. The game was on Sunday. They flew back from London. I think it was by his Tuesday press conference. I think he came out and said that Nick Foles was going to be the starter. So it was almost immediately after they touched down back on U.S. soil that it was like, yep, Minshew mania is over. Time to go back to Nick Foles and see how they can actually see if they can take over the AFC South, because I think they're actually they're in playoff contention at this point. So
yeah, I think they're a game out. That's a pretty tight race right now. The other one you put in there was to go ahead and drop Peyton Barber. That Ronald Jones was the man. Ronald Jones I picked him up, had a pretty good week, but a little scary because that all came in passing and short touchdown run. They have come out and said he still's going to be a big part of that, and even maybe more passing routes. But Peyton Barber, to me, is a little more questionable this week than he was last week. What do you think?
I think when it came to Ronald Jones, I was definitely on the fence in terms of actually wanting to start him this week. But not necessarily because of the matchup, but just because I know that Bruce Arians is one of the more straight shooting head coaches, but still, look, we couldn't really take away too much from saying he's going to be the starter, because what does starter mean? He takes over the first snap. Does he get 55% of the workload? Because there was still Peyton Barber, there was still Dario Ngubwale. So there was still a 3-headed committee. So we really needed to see what that workload was going to look like. And I think Ronald Jones, he smashed up until the point where he fumbled, and that gave way to Peyton Barber taking over. So, I mean, if you're in a PPR league, of course, Ronald Jones definitely made his day. What was he, 8 for 80 or something like that, or something along those lines? Yeah. So I think from that standpoint, also Bruce Arians came out today saying that they want to increase or at least maintain or increase his passing game work. He's saying he's going to continue to develop him as a receiver, and that he can run even a deeper route tree than what he showed this past week. So from that standpoint, I think that hurts Peyton Barber for sure. Dario Ngubwale, he should still continue to get his workload, like in the 2-minute drill and some of the third down passing work. But yeah, I think all signs pointing up for Ronald Jones, but Peyton Barber not looking so great.
I agree. And, but like I said, I still think snap count was almost 50-50, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, snap count was fairly similar, but it was just that, I mean, Jones got more of the touches, and then he wound up, they both wound up scoring touchdowns. So I think we can still, I think it's, I think the easiest analogy I can pinpoint, like just off the top of my head, would be something like the Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams, that type of split, like where we might see them an equal amount, but Aaron Jones has the lead in that backfield, very much the same that Ronald Jones has the lead in his backfield. And of course, that offense isn't as productive as Green Bay, at least as much as we would want it to be.
Ty Johnson was a drop a week ago, and that probably hasn't changed any.
No, and I made the note in this article was that, I've got the receipts because this article came out before each of these press conferences, because it was like as soon as that article came out, Doug Marrone came out and said that Nick Foles was going to be the starter. The article came out like early in the afternoon, and then it was like,
I trust you.
Bruce Arians was saying, Peyton Barber is going to be the backup, and then the same thing for Ty Johnson. I don't think that much would really change on his status, and then of course the concussion and whatnot kind of makes things worse, and especially with Matt Stafford being out, and we don't know really what his timetable is going to be at this point. I think early reports from today even were saying that he was going to practice, but then he was at practice, but he wasn't practicing. So it doesn't sound like he's going to play again this Sunday. So
but a lot of veteran quarterbacks don't practice on Wednesday. I thought the same thing, and I've heard a couple people say that too. Right.
Well, Matt Ryan was actually practicing today.
Okay, I'm not saying everyone, but
I'm just saying,
over the years, it hasn't been uncommon for some veteran quarterbacks to take Wednesday off. So when they say he was practiced but didn't practice, but was at practice, I do agree. Friday, you got to wait and see.
Yeah, you got to wait and see. But especially with his like limited workload, and he's not really involved in the passing game, and all that. It's not really something. For as excited as everybody was to go and pick him up, what was it, 2-3 weeks ago? Just kind of looking like it. The replaceability of what Kerryon Johnson was bringing to the table just really isn't there.
All right. And Mitch Trubisky, do we need to talk much?
No.
At
this point, I know people are either clamoring for Chase Daniels to take over, or with this Colin Kaepernick workout that's happening on Saturday, supposedly, maybe folks are thinking that they're going to make a move, or even the Cam Newton rumors that I think that were brought up since Cam Newton got put on IR and he might not be in Carolina next year. The people are hoping that Cam Newton is going to be one of the Chicago Bears in 2020.
I would assume even in 2 quarterbacks leagues, it's hard to start him now. I know things happen and there's bye weeks. We got 4 teams on bye, but that's a tough one.
Yeah, I couldn't bring myself to do that.
All right, let's get to your drops for this week. And we're going to start out with a gentleman I traded for this morning. And then I read your article. Brandon Cooks, wide receiver, Los Angeles Rams, 79% owned in Yahoo. And you are recommended that he is currently a drop candidate. Tell me more, because he's on my team.
Why? One, the concussions are definitely an issue. I know that he met with the specialist and they say he should be cleared to return back to practice, like once the symptoms start to subside, and he can be cleared to resume the season whenever he's ready. Already ruled out for week 11, so we'll see what his week 12 status is. But I guess the health thing is already one issue. The other issue is just the way that offense has been running. Jared Goff, Jared Goff was already like a borderline, let's say slightly above average quarterback, but he was able to, like Sean McVay, an elite offensive line, a really great running game, and Todd Gurley, that they were able to mask all of that. But when you take away Todd Gurley, you take away that offensive line, what are you left with? You're left with, again, like an average quarterback. So if Jared Goff doesn't even have the time in order to press the ball downfield because Brandon Cook's ADOT is something like 14 yards, then what you really don't have a sustainable workload. Those touchdowns aren't going to be there. Those deep passes aren't going to be there. I mean, that's why Cooper Kupp has been getting the lion's share of the targets. I mean, Robert Woods is now starting to fill in after Cooper Kupp got blanked this past week. But really, I mean, you really can't count on that much from a player that is playing a position or he runs the type of routes that offense just isn't set up to really use anymore.
All right. I have to just admit, I traded D.D. Westbrook for him. I know. There's some rumors. We don't know. Blah, blah, blah. Hopefully Cook comes back and maybe gives me I don't need a wide receiver, but I needed a little protection for my playoff run.
Okay.
And here's the thing. For a couple of reasons, I needed the roster spot. Okay. I was going to be cutting a pretty good player. And just to be honest, I mean, it's back to, we talk a lot. I outthink myself and think outside the box. To me, except in this trade, and I know Lou's saying no because me and Lou talked about this a couple of days ago, and I declined the trade originally. But then I was going to drop someone else and maybe even had to drop Westbrook because of the way my team is set up for the playoffs.
Gotcha.
And I had an IR spot. So I figured the gamble was better to trade Westbrook and get Cooks, put him on my IR spot, and maybe I get something out of him. I mean, it's my goal.
It's not impossible.
We can talk about Westbrook. Westbrook, even with Foles, didn't do anything in week 1. I mean, there's still an opportunity. I do know he's gotten some high targets on the team, but he's by far not been a breakout. So that's the gamble. So,
and we'll see. I mean, so he's already ruled out for week 11. So that's when they play the Bears. Week 12, they're playing the Ravens. Week 13, they're playing the Cardinals. So that's not bad. Week 14, they're playing the Seahawks. Week 15, they're playing the Cowboys. And week 16, they're playing the 49ers. So that's not great for LA's schedule, like going forward, at least in terms of like secondary and also defensive runs matchups.
And I'm hoping I don't need him. I mean, I have to, I'm not, like I said, I'm quarterback and running back heavy. So I'm not super, great wide receivers, but, I'm going to start Thielen, Allen, Juju Schuster.
Thielen even playing this week? I don't think he's playing this week.
No, I'm talking playoffs.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
I'm talking, and I do have Robert Woods. So, it's just my thing. Westbrook wouldn't have played either. If my better guys are healthy. And Lou is definitely in the chat room now. He's mad at me.
I see him.
He's never going to answer any of my questions again. But Lou, I took your advice, I think on Monday night, Tuesday morning when the trade, I actually declined the trade.
Always listen to Lou. He'll never steer you.
Always listen to Lou, who I whooped his butt the other day, and I'm first place. Oh yeah, that's right. I'm in first place in the league you're in also, but that is correct. I'm just saying, I thought this was a better move than cutting somebody that I didn't want to cut, because to me, they both have a gamble, and that's why. So maybe I should have read your article first, but we'll see.
That's a gamble. We'll see.
The problem is, I believe you. I believe what you wrote. I believe it's he's a cut person. And you know what? If in 2 weeks he's still not playing,
though, I mean, this is the thing, and I know that we've talked about this, and you and I both agree that you, especially now, 11 weeks into the fantasy season, we have to divorce ourselves from draft cost, and we have to divorce ourselves from player name value, all those things that make rational sense. But man, it'd be so hard for me to look out on the waiver wire and see Brandon Cooks out on the waiver wire and not think like, well, I could at least stash him.
Yeah.
Like maybe I could harvest some value out. It'd be hard for me not to, because I mean, at this point, who are we holding on our benches, right? Like we're holding handcuffs. We're holding second and third stringers that we're hoping like might give us some flex appeal. So to see a guy with Brandon Cooks and his upside sitting on the waiver wire, everybody would just jump to have him.
Right.
But at the same time, if you're the one holding him, man, he has to feel like an anchor on your roster, because he's not giving you anything.
Last night on the second best show on the Sportscrew Radio Network is the League of Anarchy Fantasy Football Podcast. And I think we had 9 people from our league on there. And to close the show, I asked every player, who's the one player on your roster that every time you look at it, you go, I hate that guy. You all have those.
Yes.
And it was a great question. Because everyone had different ways of answering it.
Yeah.
I had a toss up. I had Westbrook on my last night. I still had Westbrook since I drafted him. And I've had Thielen.
Oh, okay.
I answered Thielen instead because I know he could be getting me points. And every time I look at my roster, I'm like, damn it. I just hate Thielen. I don't hate Thielen. I hate that I have him on my roster right now. It just makes me struggle a little bit. But Westbrook would have been my number 2 pick that I just every week I look and go, I can't play him, can't start him even in bye week. I tried to do other things. Yeah. And as fantasy players, we do that. It's easy to look at your roster. And I'm sure you have teams where you look every week, you look at that roster and you go, I hate that he's on my team, but you can't cut him. You can't trade him. And it's random people. So,
well, yeah. I mean, I'd be surprised if Odell Beckham didn't pop up at least once or twice when you're asking people that, because again, they're these players that they could generate some value if they were just if it's volume, if they're out of sync with their quarterback, or if it's just like poor matchups or whatever the case may be. Yeah. But they have value. You can't cut them, because then they're just going to wind up on somebody else's for fear of them winding up on somebody else's team. And that's when they hit their stride. But nobody's going to buy them unless you're going to sell them for something like a kicker or just like a super low value. So it's hard for you to sell them. So they just waste away on your bench.
Lou Landers is saying Duke Johnson is on more.
That's one of those guys. Yeah.
You can't cut them, but you hate them.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, I don't like to use the word hate. You just hate that they're there. You just hate that they're,
don't hate players, just hate their value.
Right.
That's it. Like, I don't hate players. It's just their current value. That's what I find to be just, it's bothersome.
Well, let's continue with your drops, because I'm assuming a few more of these kind of candidates will come up.
Sure.
And Lou's making fun that, my show has 9. We had 9 people on it, and he has other shows that don't even have 9 people to listen. Sorry, Lou, I can't help that. But, it's got to be one of the, best shows on the network. The League of Anarchy Fantasy Football Podcast. And after Brandon Cooks, you have a tight end, which is, getting ugly at that spot.
Yeah.
And you have a tight end that's on one of the greatest offenses on this side of the earth. You have Jimmy Graham, tight end, Green Bay Packers, ownership 64% on Yahoo.
Yeah, I mean, tell me what the upside is to owning Jimmy Graham at this point. I mean, he'd
be on my roster, and I'd be going.
He'd be one of those guys. I mean, you're holding him because he has that name value. I mean, it's Jimmy Graham. I mean, the guy from New Orleans, the guy that was catching touchdowns even from Russell Wilson not a couple of years ago, and then now he's playing with yet another Hall of Fame quarterback, but he's managing 4 targets ish per game. But what's your output? Right. I mean, what is your weekly output? You're hoping for a floor of maybe like 3 or 4 points, but I haven't seen him in the end zone for quite some time. Right. It's sounding like Alan Lazard is now becoming the wide receiver 2. The running backs are still getting a decent amount of targets out of the backfield, and then now you've got Devontae Adams now sucking up at least 9 or 10 targets per game. So really, what's the workload for Jimmy Graham? What's the likelihood that he's going to wind up scoring a touchdown? And if you're just going to bank on the upside that because he plays on a good team and he gets a few targets a game, okay, I guess I can kind of see that. But with all of the other I guess, upside tight ends that have kind of popped up over these last few weeks, Kyle Rudolph has now started to pop up. Tyler Eifert now just fell into the end zone this past week. Ross Dwelle, out in San Francisco now with George Kittle out. I mean, there are these other tight ends now that offer similar or more upside based off of either injury or workload, that you don't have to hold on to these guys. Despite the name value, you don't have to hold on to them. So if you just look at these players, if you look at these plays and their production objectively, it might be easier for you than to say, yeah, I'll just go with this guy, or see if I can just unload, or either through drops or even selling low if you have to see if you can get a different player, or a player with like more upside at that position. Because tight end's a wasteland.
Right. Lou's asking Graham or Hawkinson moving forward, and then he follows that up with Graham or Witten moving forward.
For me at this point, to be quite honest with you, if it was for between Graham and Hawkinson, I would still honestly say Graham, because if without Matt Stafford playing, I'm not all that interested in trying to like roster a rookie tight end with a backup quarterback. Between Graham and Gesicki, I actually might take Gesicki at this point. Right. I don't see much of a drop off, and especially with like with the projected volume and whatnot. I could probably see.
I'm going to wait for the article next week because I have Kelsey on bye next week. I'm going to have to stream somebody. So
yeah.
Of the ones you named, I haven't looked. Did any of them, like I've heard Fant? Well, Fant, I don't think Fant is going to be on too many waiver wires.
No, and I think Fant now, he popped a couple weeks ago because he scored that 75-yard TD. So now, and
that's true.
And of course, because there's no Emmanuel Sanders, so Fant should have a larger projected target share within that offense. So I could see people kind of like working themselves into believing that there should be more there for them. I mean, they're still playing Minnesota this week, and Minnesota has a fairly decent defense, but still, I mean, Dallas was still able to use both Blake Jarwin and Jason Witten against the Vikings last week, and they got a pretty decent amount of targets, and they made some pretty decent plays there. So it's possible that Noah Fant can wind up doing more, but now instead of having Dak Prescott throwing targets to tight ends, it's now Brandon Allen throwing targets to tight ends. So that's slightly different.
I'm just looking now because I'm going to make you start your article for next week. If I was going to pick up someone now to play next week, on my waiver wire right now is Jimmy Graham, Vance McDonald, Delaney Walker, who's supposed to come back. If not this week, should be back next week. Juno Smith, who didn't do much this week. Tyler Eifert. I mean, those are kind of the top tight ends, that's going to be available for me.
In week 12, you're saying?
Well, they're available now.
But you're looking forward to week 12?
Right. I'm going to start Kelsey this week. I'm just wondering if any of those are worth rostering. And I guess that's my point. I don't think any of those are worth rostering this week. Because
if you're planning ahead, the easy answer would be Vance McDonald. Week 12, Steelers play the Bengals. There you go.
Yeah, good point. I looked real quick and saw Cleveland. That's this week.
Yeah, next week they play the Bengals.
The issue, that's the thing I have to decide tomorrow because they do play tomorrow. So I'd have to pick him up by tomorrow morning and drop somebody. And then that would be my Kelsey play or replacement for 1 week.
Yeah, that seems like a direct.
Who does Jimmy Graham have on the he's on bye, I think, in week.
Yeah, they're on bye this week. I forget who they have coming out of the bye. But
San Francisco.
Yeah.
Right.
Which, I mean, we just saw them on Monday night. Their defense, I mean, it can be beaten.
Right. Lou was so excited because he posted in that chat room for you answered Vance versus Cincinnati.
We ride at the same spot then.
Lou wants credit for everything. Jesus. Whatever, Lou. All right. Another person I'm sure is on a lot of people's rosters that they just look at and go, why? Robbie Anderson.
Yeah, for the same reason. I mean, him and Brandon Cooks, right? They have that. They're the same archetype when it comes to for being a wide receiver. Those deep targets that need time to in order to like develop for quarterbacks to wind up throwing them. He has a similar ADOT, if not, I think maybe like a yard longer than Brandon Cooks. If I'm not mistaken. I think his is maybe like 15, and Brandon Cooks is like 14, somewhere in there. But either way, I mean, they need those deep targets in order to hit value. And Sam Darnold isn't throwing those. I mean, their offensive line is either ranked 32nd or 31st in the league, according to Football Outsiders. So without really having that time in order to make those deep passes, but Sam Darnold has been just fine throwing it to the ghost of Demaryius Thomas. Jamison Crowder has now been in the wide receiver one conversation the past couple of weeks in a row. I mean, Robbie Anderson's kind of on the outside looking in. I mean, this past week he was one target for 11 yards. right, what's the point in holding him at this point when we don't really think of the Jets offense as an offense that's going to be passing deep? So he's not an essential hold at this point.
All right. So now I'm going to ask, would you rather have Robbie Anderson, though, on your bench with a lot of matchups that are pretty good the rest of the season, or Cooks, because you have them both on your list?
I'd rather keep Cooks because we can see the highs for Los Angeles as a full unit are much higher than the
more explosive offense, even though it's struggling.
Yeah, I mean, we've already seen it twice this year. I mean, at least a couple of times this year where they've been pushed to putting up 30, 40 points in a game. Right. I do not see that happening with the Jets. Yeah, I mean, even at best. I mean, what's this past week?
Someone in my league cut Robbie Anderson today. So obviously that would be my, and I have Cook. So, all right. Rashad Penny, running back, Seattle Seahawks. I agree 100%. I don't think he's worth holding. The only thing he's worth holding is if you own Chris Carson and maybe as a handcuff.
Yeah. And even then, I mean, I'd be, especially at this point, especially after because I was writing this article during the game on Monday night, and I already had earmarked Penny as somebody to drop, and then I was about to write this blurb, and then he fumbled. I was like, oh yeah, so I'm definitely writing this. That's a sign. But I don't even think the Seahawks really want to play.
Sometimes they write themselves, don't they?
Yeah, I don't even think really the Seahawks would be all that happy about playing Rashad Penny, even if Chris Carson were to unfortunately go down. Like, knock on wood, I hope that doesn't happen. I mean, they would probably try and find, I don't know, like off the street replacements, like in the case that would happen. I don't really think that they'd be all too happy about turning to Penny for, to carry the load, much like, or unlike the Vikings. Let's say if Dalvin Cook were to go down, they'd be more than happy to start Alexander Madison. If Ezekiel Elliott were to go down, they'd be just fine with Tony Pollard, like picking up a larger workload. But Penny as a backup, they don't seem all too keen on like giving him anything more than they actually have to, which is just maybe a few carries to spell Chris Carson.
Right. All right. And then on your concerning trend is Devin Singletary, which just a week or two ago, everyone was all excited that he was the man. And
I think that's why I put it out there, because I know like Dynasty Twitter was all ablaze that like when Devin Singletary started picking up a larger snap share, some more targets than Frank Gore, everybody was ready to crown him the starting running back for Buffalo. And he did actually wind up starting, I believe it was not this past week, but the week beforehand, he actually wound up starting that game, and he performed well. But I don't think Sean McDermott or like even the offensive coordinator, they really see him as being the guy, or they want to go ahead and crown him as like that starting running back. They very much see it as a 1-2 punch for as long as Frank Gore, continues to show up and he wants to continue
Frank
playing.
Gore's going to get in some. I don't think.
I don't think that's really going to change. So like while everybody was happy to see David Montgomery getting his time in the sun and like completely ousting Mike Davis from Chicago, and like Tariq Cohen is just relegated to third downs. And even though Tariq Cohen wound up scoring a touchdown, David Montgomery didn't. But when Ronald Jones was getting all the love this past week, it's just easier for people to just go say, well, now Devin Singletary, it's your time. But that's really not the case. It's still him, and Frank Gore is still very much involved.
Right. And yeah, and you said that in your article. I had Ronald Jones and David Montgomery this morning. Mm-hmm. And I traded them both away.
You're a trading fiend, man.
Yeah, well, I traded them for Marlon Mack.
Okay.
And Devontae Freeman.
No, on the injury risk side.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing. One, my roster's pretty good, so I could only start one of those running backs. So I had to make the decision: do I start Jones or do I start Montgomery? That's a toss-up in my book. Marlon Mack is not a toss-up. Marlon Mack, I would start over both of them.
Sure.
So I thought having Marlon Mack instead of those two was a better for my roster and for my decisions going now through the playoffs.
Okay.
Then obviously the benefit was I have Freeman that I don't have to play. Can sit on my bench. I can wait till playoffs come. They got a few decent matchups. It's not great, but I believe if one of my top running backs get hurt, Freeman is an option. So I kind of got it. That trade was made for one, a better starter and easier decisions through my playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And two, Freeman as I have a couple handcuffs for my main guys, but he's just that, because I have Barkley,
Right.
Barkley, and I'm not a fan of his backup. So I thought Freeman to me is a better backup than Gallman. Anyway, if I had the choice right now, I think I'd start Freeman healthy than I would Gallman.
Again, you're gambling. You're gambling at that point. I mean, foot injuries.
Right.
Man, it's just,
right. Ice cold, long neck, beer never broke my heart. But diamond rings and fantasy football running backs have tore this boy apart. I'm just saying.
But I think I guess from a process standpoint, now is the best time to buy an asset like Freeman.
Sure.
And at least from the way that Atlanta came out this past Sunday and the way they ran the ball against New Orleans, even though, New Orleans, I guess there's some rumors around, they kind of thought they had this one in the bag and they apparently slept walk in it and then they got slapped in the mouth. But if they're at least able to get their running game back on track, then sure. And Freeman gets healthy and then maybe they sit him out for a couple of weeks and then his foot isn't, it's not a Liz Frank injury like Cam Newton had or has rather. Then sure. I can see that working out.
That's why at least I think Mac was the better player in the 4-player deal.
Mm-hmm.
So at a minimum, I have a healthy Mac.
Sure.
And there's a couple negatives that come with Freeman. One, we never see him again. Obviously, that hurts me.
Yeah.
Or two, Hill comes out and really has a couple of great weeks to where now they're sharing, maybe the spotlight. That could hurt me also as far as being afraid to start Freeman because he's not getting, the lion's share. But hey, like I said, it's a gamble. It's on the bottom of my bench.
Yeah.
And like I said, believe it or not, going in the playoffs, it's nice knowing every week I'm not going to have to go Jones or Montgomery. Or Montgomery.
Right.
Just put Marlon Mack in. I just have Marlon Mack.
Yeah.
I'm going to have Barkley, Fournette, and Marlon Mack in my flex. I'm more than happy with that. Instead of fighting over those two guys the whole time. So, all right, that does it. Let's stream some quarterbacks now. Real quick, why don't you review where do people find the quarterback streaming article?
Over at 444.com. And that one's out on Tuesdays as soon as because Josh Moore, the owner of 444 website, he does the adjusted fantasy points allowed tool. It's one of our primary tools that we use in season, and it's done for all the primary skill positions for fantasy: quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, and running back. So it looks at the the points scored by that particular position across the defensive matchups that they have and adjust for matchup. And that's some of the primary metrics that we use for some of our streaming articles. It's not just me, but like Jen Eakins, she does the tight end streaming, and then also Kevin.
Yeah, on the website they have every position broken down.
They do each of all of them broken down, and we all use that.
Writing the article for streaming, it's individual people that I'm assuming is going to put more time in it because they're only covering one position.
Right.
Jump right to the results from last week. You had Derek Carr, Daniel Jones, Sam Darnold, Brian Hoyer as streamers. And, depending on your league, I have that 3 of those were in the top 12. Now you showed Derek Carr was just 13, but I think it depends on your scoring and what.
I think that was a placeholder at the time because I think when I started writing that on Sunday, it was either early Sunday evening. Not all of the games have been played, and all the updates were in there. I think he fell to somewhere like QB 17, somewhere in there.
Right.
So mid-range like QB 2, so a decent a floor option. But then the other two, those guys went, they were lights out. Sam Darnold and Daniel Jones.
Yep.
Daniel Jones with 4 touchdowns.
Quarterback 2, Daniel Jones, Sam Darnold, quarterback 6.
Yeah,
we're both in the same game.
Yeah.
I did have someone ask me because I'm almost an expert. I'm working on getting that. I'm working on the badge. What do they call that when you're a Boy Scout? Is it a badge?
Yeah, badge. Badge that you wear on the sash. I thought it was
fantasy expert badge.
Mm-hmm.
I'm working on that. They asked me Brian Hoyer or Fitzpatrick. I'm on all Fitzpatrick. Now Fitzpatrick didn't have a great week, but he did do better than Hoyer. So,
well, yeah, a lot of people did, and I caught that. I linked to a tweet thread from Stephen Holder. Forget which. It's like the Indianapolis Star, if I'm not mistaken. But he's one of the primary beat writers for the Indianapolis Colts. And during the game, because they were. The Colts were losing to the Dolphins, who everybody assumed had been, they were tanking. And he was asking, trying to figure out like what the heck was going on, because the team they looked terrible. And his notes were that, Jacoby Brissett was practicing throughout the week, and then he gets pulled on Saturday night, early Sunday morning. But Brian Hoyer, he wasn't taking the first team reps like throughout the week. This was a team that was like legitimately preparing as if Jacoby Brissett was going to start.
Right.
So like Brian Hoyer wasn't afforded the practice reps in order to really get on track. And now, of course, folks might say that Brian Hoyer, he's a 7, 8, 9, 10-year veteran, all the other stuff, and they were playing against Miami, but still, this is what happens when your coaching staff doesn't properly prepare for a game. Well, I get that they want to try and get their franchise quarterback and see if they can get him to actually play in a game, but he had just suffered an MCL injury. So why were you even trying to prepare him for that game against that opponent? Just have Brian Hoyer go out there, have him do all the first team reps throughout the week and bring Jacoby Brissett back, because now they have a divisional game against a team that was on bye the previous week. So that's the game they should have been focusing on to have Jacoby Brissett for.
Right.
And now they're here in this position.
Well, unfortunately, 2 weeks in a row, people been buying in on, if you're playing against Miami, start everybody. If you're playing against Miami, play that defense. Well, that's changed in 2 weeks. It's not necessarily the case. They're fighting back a little bit. And now that they won 1 or 2 and they're kind of out of that first pick race already, it seems like, then they might as well go out and try to win a couple more, all right, your top streamer this week, Kyle Allen versus the Falcons. What do you like about it?
Everything in that game.
Everything.
Oh, yeah.
For the in-depth information. Let's move on.
Hashtag analysis. Yeah. Both sides of the ball. Because for especially for a quarterback, and especially for now backup turn starting quarterback, we want some we want the opposing offense to actually do something that will actually pull you into a shootout. Like, we don't want them to kind of just sit back and generate a lead and then just have them use their running game in order to bleed out the clock. I don't think that's going to be the case here, because Atlanta, especially after last week, showed that they still got some fight in them. Now, how many points they're going to be able to put up, we don't know, but the projected game total is supposed to be over 50 points. I think it's like the second highest on the slate for week 11.
50.5 right the moment, you say.
Right. So, so that game is projected to have offensive scoring on for both teams, not just Carolina. So that means that they can't just sit there and use Christian McCaffrey and just plow into them throughout the entire game. But also from a defensive standpoint, while Atlanta was able to get to Drew Brees 6 times, I don't see that happening twice. Kyle Allen has taken at least 2 sacks in almost every start. His fumbles are an issue, but but from a defensive secondary standpoint, we've seen at least 200 yards passing and almost 2 touchdowns in almost every single game, for opposing quarterbacks, except for Drew Brees. Now, he did get I think it was 248 yards passing in week 11, but still, they've got all of the weapons that are, going complete kryptonite to Atlanta's secondary. DJ Moore can actually operate within the slot and outside. And we saw Julio Jones get off for quite a bit against, actually Michael Thomas, actually destroy them from the slot, in week 11. Curtis Samuel on the outside for deep passes. Even Alvin Kamara was he had a stat line of, I think it was 8 targets, or no, he had 10 targets this past week. And I think he had it was 8 for 50. That's just through receiving. Now, we don't know what that works if they were trying to limit his rushing attempts just coming off of the ankle. But Christian McCaffrey should have like at least a field day against that team, at least as both a runner and a receiver. And then we'll see if Greg Olsen can still continue to do his thing, because he actually got he was just short of 100 yards this past week.
I also think Greg Olsen's like taking charge of that team. I think he's taking charge in the huddle.
It looks like it. I'm hoping that, but from what I'm hearing, it seems like, and this is just pure conjecture, but it seems like they're like him and Kyle Allen are somewhat out of sync. I know that Greg Olsen would much rather prefer Cam Newton to be in the backfield, but it seems like over these past couple of weeks, things have started to they turn in a positive direction.
And Allen is available in about 86% in Yahoo leagues as of Tuesday.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the matchup of the week, and I hope it doesn't turn out to be a dud like with the Falcons and the Saints. But I think this is going to be a really good matchup.
All right, explain, and it's not too hard. Derek Carr's playing the Bengals, so
yeah, that's pretty much. That's the hashtag analysis.
Yeah, that's the analysis.
Yeah, so now the Bengals are now what everybody thought of the Dolphins 2 weeks ago, right? If you want your players to get right, you have them play against Cincinnati.
Right. Then we jump to Sam Darnold. Is he still a streamer now with this, a couple of weeks and a soft schedule? When does he jump from being a streamer to somebody you might just start for the next few weeks?
I think after he starts putting up, because Sam Darnold's been more of a floor play.
Consistency.
Yeah, I mean, consistency, but consistency in the 14, 15, 16-point range. Now, this past week, of course, was one of those where, again, he got pulled into a shootout and forced into scoring, 27 points or something like that this past week? 21.7, take that back. So either way, that's the game environment that you need in order to have somebody like Sam Darnold kind of poke his head out of his shell and then throw for a couple of touchdowns. He actually ran for one this past week. But either way, with this game, I don't really see that being the case, because both of those teams, I think they're 31st and 32nd in terms of pace of play and actually plays per game. So, and I believe the projected total is 38, 39 points. So there's going to be a slow, boring game. Now, both defenses are fairly weak, so I do expect to be some points scored. And with the way that Sam Darnold's been able to find Jamison Crowder and Demaryius Thomas, I can see him having another one of those floor games between 13 and 15 points. So I still consider him to be a streamer, but I just can't see him being an every week starter unless the matchup says that he's going to get pulled into a 28, 30 points, that sort of matchup. And I just don't see that happening here.
We'll go backwards here in a minute, but I'll jump all the way ahead. You have him as your look ahead streamer. Also, that was my point. You had him last week. Mm-hmm. You have him this week. He's your look ahead next week. So again, is Sam Darnold still a streamer?
Definitely still a streamer. Because in week 12, that would be one of those matchups where I think he'll get pulled into a shootout. Like Derek Carr has been dealing, the Raiders offense has been able to. The Raiders have been putting up, I want to say at least 20 points per game over their last three. So that seems more of a game environment where Sam Darnold is going to be forced to generate points. Like the Jets, they have to score points in order to keep up. It's not like with Washington where I could see that game being, 17-10 at the that could be the final score of the game.
So if you had two look ahead guys, would Carr be on that list next?
Sure.
So I'm assuming Carr and him are going to be your main streamers next week too.
Most likely. Because I think
it can happen in a week, but
things would change. But I think just from a matchup based standpoint, I think those guys would be the most likely streamers heading into week 12.
Well, the honorable mention I find curious. A quick comment on that. That's Haskins. Hasn't looked good. I know it's against the Jets, which you're talking could be a shootout, but I don't think they're going to let him throw the ball.
It's less about the quarterback and more about the guys, actually just singularly the guy he's going to be throwing to. Because if you look at some of the receivers that have beat the Jets, it's been Odell Beckham, it's been Philip Dorsett, it's been speedy receivers, like these guys that run 4.33, 4.40s. And Terry McLaurin runs a 4.340. And we've seen Terry McLaurin hit some of those deep balls and take him to the house multiple times so far this year, to the point where he's setting rookie records. So if we can at least project Terry McLaurin for one of those like long bomb touchdowns and maybe two, then that has to intersect with Dwayne Haskins having a good day. So, I mean, 80 yards and a touchdown for a wide receiver is great. 80 yards and a touchdown for like a quarterback, you're already talking about like 8 points right there. So if he winds up throwing for 100 yards or like 100 more yards and maybe not, I mean, we're talking about, again, QB2 type numbers. So it's less about the quarterback and more about the receiver that he's going to be throwing to and what he can possibly do with that.
All right. Now that's going to make me go into something that, now me and Lou Landers do start every Sunday morning right here on this network, live on Facebook. We answer questions. We have a bunch of questions, but now I'm going to ask you because I have Terry McLaurin in a league and I have DJ Moore in a league. I'm going to have to start one of them this week.
You DJ Moore easy.
Well, that's kind of what I thought. And right now he's in my lineup. Because I'm going to start Julio Jones, DJ Moore, Odell Beckham Jr. McLaurin is going to stay on my bench. Now, when I think about it, if anyone would be questionable sit there, would be Odell Beckham. But
yes, I was just about to say that.
I can't sit Odell Beckham. Can I? Come on.
It's hard. I mean, but objectively speaking, I mean, you can look at Odell Beckham's target share. You can look at how Pittsburgh has been able to limit opposing offenses over the past few weeks since they acquired Minkah Fitzpatrick. It's going to be a Thursday night game. If you take that into consideration, it's the visual game. If you care about that.
For Odell Beckham, though. To me, that's a plus. He wants to shine when he's the only one out there.
But it's not just him anymore. It's Jarvis Landry.
Yeah,
I mean, it's Kareem Hunt now taking.
Always knocking my teams. Always.
I mean, I could, but in terms of let's even take it completely to not just look at targets. Let's say, who do you think has the better chance to score a touchdown between Odell Beckham and Terry McLaurin based on their matchups this week? And I say Terry McLaurin.
I think Odell, though, is just as likely to catch a 12-yard out and turn it into a touchdown, 70 yards.
They just tried doing that this past week, and it didn't work.
They're going to try it again. Oh, it didn't work one game.
I mean, they tried multiple times in the end zone this past week from like the 1 yard line, and Odell Beckham still couldn't get an end zone target, or like not an end zone target, an end zone catch.
Right. Your quarterback to reconsider starting this week, Deshaun Watson. One of the top quarterbacks in the league.
QB2 on the year, if I'm not mistaken.
Why you can't sit him? Come on.
It's hard. I mean, I completely acknowledge that, but at the same time, it's like, again, if you objectively look at these matchups, I mean, how can you look at what the Ravens have done? Not just to, I mean, of course, they just played against Ryan freaking Finley, this past week in the Cincinnati Bengals. Of course, that we can't take it, but they just played against Tom Brady and the Patriots, completely shut them down. So how can you look at what the Ravens have done since they acquired Marcus Peters and look at that matchup and say, yeah, I really want to start my guy against him. Now, if Will Fuller actually plays in this game, all right, I can get behind that. But if you have, DeAndre Hopkins, sure, that's great, but who else, are you really looking to step up if you're going to at least expect, bracket coverage for DeAndre Hopkins? Kiki Kuti, who's been in the doghouse, they've had to replace him with a couple of guys. Darren Fells, the tight end. Maybe this could be that Duke Johnson game we've been looking for. Deshaun Watson can get there. He can make value just on his legs alone because he's been rushing so much. But again, it's just that I know everybody's going to start him. You have, it's almost like you don't have to, but you have to start somebody that's in with somebody like Deshaun Watson. But at least, I don't know, man. Like with the way that Baltimore Ravens defense has been looking these past couple of weeks, it's at least worth looking at your options.
I understand what you're saying, but no one's going to sit him.
Nobody's going to sit him. I probably wouldn't even do that. But it's just looking at things from a matchup based, data driven perspective. It's just hard to look at how both
data.
It's just, not even from a data perspective too, just from the film. I mean, how can you look at like how they've been able to limit opposing offenses and just say that, yeah, let's do Deshaun Watson, click, let's go, let's do it. I mean, I can't believe that people are just confidently starting Deshaun Watson this week.
Right.
It's going to be an awesome game, but if I own Deshaun Watson in any league, I'd hope that all of my other fantasy assets on my team.
Yeah, but you're not starting any of your streamers above him, right?
No,
just say no. You're not going to start Darnold over him.
No, not Sam Darnold. Kyle Allen?
Maybe. All right. We'll see. I have to check your lineups, see where you're at.
But I don't have Deshaun Watson anymore.
I don't know
because he went too early in the draft. I would never have invested that much in a quarterback that early.
All right, there you go. A Fantasy Fan Sportscast. Our drops of the week. Written by Mr. Chris Allen. Data by Mr. Chris Allen. Analysis by Mr. Chris Allen. Quarterback streamers. Data by Chris Allen. Statistical information, Chris Allen. Article, Chris Allen. So
you make it sound like I do a lot.
Hey, I enjoyed reading it. And I should have maybe not made some moves, but what fun is a Tuesday or a Wednesday for in the week of fantasy football if you're not making moves?
Exactly. Hey, we're all gambling here. All right. We both have a poker background. Like we know that it's just as fun. It's just as fun gambling on making some of these trades and making these waiver wire moves as just as fun as it is watching the games and looking at our scores later on Sunday night.
Amen. I couldn't have said it any better. Chris, one more time, repeat where people can find you because it's much more important than finding me.
You can find me on Twitter at Chris Allen FFWX. So come holler at me and tell me why I'm wrong.
Yeah. I have this hour to do that. You can just find me Easy Kill. That's easy KILL at a fantasy fan because I am just a fantasy fan and had a great time.
Always
information out there. And you know what? We will see you next Wednesday night, right around here, about 10 o'clock on YouTube Live, if you want to put in comments. And you know what? Had a good time. Thanks again, Chris. We'll see you next week. And like I said, ice cold beer. No, wait. Ice cold long neck beer.
There it is.
Never going to let me down.
That's true.
Diamond rings and fantasy football teams. Have played havoc on me. I got to say, played havoc. My new favorite song. I'm going to listen to it all night while I sleep. Say goodnight.
Good night.
This has been Just a Fantasy Fan podcast. And to keep your fantasies going, follow us at justafantasyfan.com. Say good night. Good night.